The final session now is the panel session, which will be chaired by Jane Treadwell, who is also a member of the advisory panel, but is the CEO of the Australian Centre for Excellence in Public Sector Design.
This is the panel to actually start the conversation. First up with people from a range of areas, and in introducing them now, I'd like to let you know about Glenn King, who is CEO of Services New South Wales and a very strong advocate for cloud by the sounds of it. We'll hear more in terms of being a startup. Glenn started his role in 2012 in November, and since that time has been doing some pretty marvellous things for New South Wales and implementing part of their ICT policy too. Richard Host at the other end is from Fire and Rescue New South Wales. He rescued us too, as we were needing someone to fill in for David Kennedy, so thank you, Richard. He too has some stories to tell this week, I think, in terms of going live with one of the pilots in the cloud area. Steve Hodgkinson, Steve and I worked in Victoria together some years ago, but is now a research director with Ovum and also on the advisory panel, and Barbara Reid, who is keeping the advisory panel very focused at times on the importance of information, not just ICT, and will also, I'm sure, add a quality to the conversation today. The area of, or the topic for our conversation, which the process of which is I'm going to ask for some responses from the panel, and then we'll open up to the floor to get queries from you, both to the panel, but to begin again that dialogue in terms of cloud and government in the cloud. Excuse me. I suppose one of the most interesting things for us today is to actually think about the fact that there are exciting and worrying things about ICT today and the cloud. Words like cloud and apps are actually commonplace. They're not just the province of ICT people anymore. And with that comes raised and extensive expectations of customers. So the cloud is no longer the next best big thing. It's actually here, as aptly described in the new cloud services policy and guidelines. And it, along with the intersecting trends of mobility, social media interactions, open information, multiple devices, is bringing a lot of things into stark focus. And as John said, you know, there's stuff within the clouds that is seen before, as well as what it does is actually bring really forward to the thinking and deciding points issues around not just ICT governance, but enterprise and whole of government governance, the alignment with information, major management challenges, information, risks and opportunities, and that's what we're going to start covering now. So to the panel. Perhaps we might start with cloud from the business perspective and business transformation perspective, Glenn. From your perspective, and then perhaps wearing the shoes of other people within government, why are agencies choosing cloud services, and what have been your experiences?
Great question. Firstly, it's well worth just coming back to Service New South Wales, and you'll see that in your booklet there. But Service New South Wales launched July 1, and it's rolling out right across the state at the moment. And the only way that we could actually launch at that time frame was to actually use some key partners and cloud-based solutions to ensure that we got up and running and to ensure that we delivered to the customer expectations. So we've been rolling out service centres. There's one service centre here at the moment in the city at Haymarket, or the old McCall building, and it provides multi-agency services, so you can go in and do your RMS driver licence transactions, your birth certificates, your beekeeper's licence if you're a beekeeper out there, as well, all the various transactions. And the only way that we could actually provide and get that up and running from the November to the July period was not to build our own technology to ensure that we actually took advantage of what is some of the best practices out there at the moment, license those practices, get them up and running, and ensure that we get them in place across our channels. So we launched the service centres. We're opening service centres basically every 2 weeks. As we sit here now, we're opening one in Dubbo on Friday. We launched our contact centre, both one phone number, 137788, and we've also got our contact centre in Parramatta, 120-seat Parramatta contact centre. We've used Salesforce there, got that up and running from a software perspective in terms of knowledge management within 6 weeks. And we're also providing our head office services in terms of we've got a small, light head office and put some of the infrastructure in place in terms of email and all the other various aspects using Microsoft Cloud Vantage pretty much within a 4-week time frame as well. So we're able to move very, very fast by taking advantage of some of the organisations out there using their services and ensuring that we can actually provide them that deliver great customer experiences, including on the digital channel as well, rather than building and maintaining our own services and systems in there. The great thing, and then I'll finish because you want to hear from other people, but the great thing is it delivers great customer experience because the customers, and we've driven this from a customer perspective, are already used to these services in other organisations. And we're finding at the moment, both in terms of when customers go in, they're actually tweeting, they're actually providing us feedback, they can't believe that this is government service. And not only that, they're now actually saying this is what we expect in terms of service. And we could only do that by partnering with organisations that provide cloud solutions.
Any of the other panel members like to add?
Fire and Rescue has just gone live on Microsoft's cloud email, Office 365, and yes, it is a journey. It's actually been a business transformation. So, some of that was quite unexpected, actually. For instance, it enables bring your own device, because every device manufactured now and in the future will work with it. That was huge. Got us to reevaluate what email actually is. It's not a document and records management system. It's actually a temporal messaging system. That's a whole cultural change, massive. And then bring your own device means if people are bringing their own phone, then maybe in our new head office that we're building, we don't need desk phones. Don't need desk phones, don't need people to configure them, don't need air-conditioned rooms to hold them. And one thing is leading to another that's actually really exciting.
I've been writing about cloud services since 2009, and for the early part of the 2000s in Victoria was responsible for driving whole-of-government IT strategy. So the perspective that attracted me to the idea of cloud services many years ago was actually that it provided a better way of tackling some of the challenges that governments have in ICT. And we've already heard some of them this morning. There are three main things that come out in case studies and use cases that I've been researching over the years. And the first is just faster access to a better IT mousetrap of some sort. I use the phrase cloudy is as cloudy does. It just works because it's already working and being used by many, many other people. So why shouldn't it work for you? This is a kind of no-brainer. The second is this business transformation element where because it's already working and supporting a large, diverse user base, you can actually use it for many different things to drive changes in the business and actually short-circuit a whole lot of conversations which are constant blockers in driving IT value. Because business executives start to get confidence again that it's possible to do innovative things with IT and not end up in one of these fiasco, failed IT projects that damages everyone's career. So it really enables transformation to get kick-started again and get business people excited about the idea of that. And the third thing is into this real conundrum of shared resources in government. So how many shared services type of failure stories have we heard about in government over the decades around all the jurisdictions? And the root of it in the back of those things is the fact that the solutions that were being put forward as whole of government shared things were never engineered from the outset to be shared. They're cobbled together, spider's web spaghetti balls of complexity and compromise and old assets and old work practices and unsustainable governance and all of that. Well, surprise, surprise, cloud services are shared services that were engineered from the outset to be shared services, to be used by many people for many diverse purposes. So they are a better starting point. And surprise, surprise again, actually you don't have to ram cloud services down people's throats in some kind of mandated whole of government march. All you need to do is empower people to choose them, because on an individual agency by agency basis, they're better, faster, less expensive and less risky. So surprise, surprise again, suddenly multiple agencies are starting to use common platforms. Not because they're told to or because someone beats them with a stick if they don't, but just because it's a logical, sensible way forward, which makes sense on an agency by agency basis. So those three things actually cut at many different conundrums in government IT. And I've written case studies and use cases about these things over the years, but even I am surprised now at some of the stories that are coming out from agencies where you go, oh, geez, it's actually true. All that stuff I've been saying.
Thank you. I guess I do need to say something. I think that the enablement, the change, the different ways of delivery are just beginning to happen. And one of the things that I think is going to be an underpinning thing is that the emphasis moves from the technology to the information, and the information is where the value that we're both generating, but we also need to work out how to use much better, lies. And that transformation is part of the business transformation, I think, but also a piece that we need to be quite mindful of, because I think we're just learning about how to actually manage the information, which needs to last longer than many of the systems. The systems are mobile, they're almost, disposable, but we need to be able to change it as we need to. The core governance needs to now lie on the data and the information we need to manage.
So what then, we do have people here now and probably in the audience that have experienced cloud, and that once you get inside it, it might be empty or misty, or when people use the term journey, that means that they're actually can be a euphemism for sleepless nights. So what have your lessons been, Richard, and perhaps Glenn first up?
I think the lesson is to be careful. You can only go as fast as your organisation can handle. You need to check everything out. We were very, very careful before we decided to move to cloud email as an example. Sounds simple, but we need to make sure that we're adhering to all the things we need to adhere to and making sure that everything's kept safe. And I think you just got to be very careful. We're not moving to cloud for everything, and there's not just one kind of cloud. There are some clouds that we're having inside the government data centre, and that's the right place for it right now. So I think you've just got to make sure that you're making the right decision for the right things.
And how did you... When people say careful, it means that they're actually storing a lot behind that word.
Look, if you ask the question, why have we gone to cloud for some things? It's quite simple. We need to visualise where we need to be in 10 years' time. There is an inevitability as to where the world will be. And I don't want to lock ourselves into something that's going to stop us getting there. In fact, I want to go there now. And I want to start reaping those benefits. I want the flexibility of my staff to be able to work from anywhere. I want them to do it cost effectively. It's a thrill to do it better and more cost effective than anyone else. It turns some people on. And so it's very, very exciting.
We've done it step by step. So being a startup allows us to start. You can learn and take some of the good practices. So there's some information, for example, what we've been using in the contact centre with Salesforce. It's particularly looking at some of the areas such as knowledge management. So putting the knowledge management, which is really information that our customer service representatives can actually use, putting that on the cloud, which is providing them information and guidance on an intuitive basis rather than having standalone systems in there. Similarly, when we look at our customer flow management system in the service centre, again, that actually helps guide the customers through to ensure they're getting the right answers at the right time. But it's actually not sharing information around and holding information that we haven't actually ensured that we've got the right privacy guidelines or following the right guidelines. So we're doing it step by step to ensure we've got those in place. And you've just got to be cautious. And as Richard said, you've got to keep ensuring that we're actually learning through. And that's certainly how we're going, which gives us an advantage being a startup.
So the issues then in terms of being careful is that you sort of anticipate the risks and understand the change processes, and sometimes they're bigger than you think. So perhaps Steve and Barbara, what are your observations then on those perceived risks and possible change issues that are associated with cloud services?
Well, I sometimes get ranty about the fact that we should stop talking about the single word cloud in any way in a government conversation, because we're talking about cloud services, of course, which are services provided by counterparties or service provision organisations. So the key things, of course, are, well, what services are we talking about and who's providing them? And in that sense, it's no different to any other sourcing kind of discussion. And I think a lot of the talk about kind of the single word cloud lets people run away with the idea that somehow we're going to throw government data into some kind of consumer-grade cloud service that's hosted in China or something ridiculous. And of course, we're not talking about that. We're talking about enterprise-grade cloud services provided by trustworthy organisations in a diligent and rigorous way. And so those basics hold true. But still, it takes two to tango is one of the ways I look at this. And I use the phrase agile thinking plus cloud services equals innovation and productivity, to make the point that one part of the conversation is about the cloud service. Of course, we need to understand what it is, what its characteristics are, where the data is hosted, what the quality processes are, etc., etc. But the other part is coming into it with agile thinking and not carrying a whole lot of baggage of historical ways of approaching IT. And if we think about the main guts of this is this idea of sourcing things that already exist and using them with the minimum degree of configuration or customization, and valuing that as a benefit rather than some kind of burden. So the traditional way of writing up a big, huge, thick spec of what it is you want and throwing it over a wall to market and asking them to send you the solution in the post 18 months or 2 years later is kind of ridiculous, because now so much of the new capability that is so fantastic about the IT industry is pre-existing and being used on large scale by many different people for different things. So let's find out what that is first, and then think about how we can use that, as it already is, to do the things that need to be done in government, and make some pragmatic and sensible compromises and adjustments and trade-offs along the way. Now, that's not an academic discussion. The main point is you need to be doing it and having hands-on experience of cloud service procurement and use in small ways first, before you go out and try and do anything big and kind of audacious. Because the agile thinking part needs to be grown and nurtured internally. You can't just buy it off the shelf somehow. That's the way you as executives and people in the industry think. And seeing is believing in this regard. So if you haven't seen it actually in your heart, you don't believe it. And therefore you continue to wrap it up in kind of dysfunctional governance and method and prescription and process.
So I often get hauled in to be the brake, and it's not a role that I'm particularly comfortable in, to be the brake. And I do want to stress that the enablers are there to do this. So people will often say, oh, we can't possibly do it because the state records legislation says we can't. Well, no, actually, they've enabled it. They have changed their rules and they don't say you can't do it. Oh, we can't do it because of the privacy legislation, but for the Privacy Act. No, the Privacy Act has, in fact, the Privacy Commissioner and the Information Commissioners have all been working really hard to enable this to happen. It's not free for all, clearly, and there are a whole range of things that have been thrown back to agencies to think about. So it's not, just do it. It's not a procurement strategy which then lets you do whatever you like. There are risks. You need to evaluate the risks. You need to work out where the risks are high and low and what the issues are. But I think it's really important to stress that the regulators in the area are concerned about the same things you are. Sustainability, trust. Is the information good? Can it be interoperable across systems? Can we share it? How are you going to manage it? So the emphasis again is on stressing the enablers, but with some intelligent considerations which are being thrown, of course, back to agencies to do. And I think that this is an area we all have to learn a little bit more about, in terms of it's not just looking at security and dealing with the security aspect. There's a bigger, more holistic picture to build innovative answers that will enable the type of transformative thinking that government needs to do. But the enablers are there.
Interesting that you say sort of think first before act really quickly. One of the jobs I had as CIO in Centrelink, the person had said, if you want it badly, you'll get it badly, which is always sort of I've carried with me for some time. Glenn?
Can I just add, coming back, the great thing in terms of the work and working with some of the providers is we've looked at standardising the solutions across multi-agencies rather than customised. So, for example, we've mapped out over 800 to 900 different processes from all those different agencies. And already we've actually started to standardise some of those, whether that's proof of identity, which has all been done differently across different agencies, which coming from the old banking sector, you only have the one and done, to ensure that it's actually adding value to the customer as well. There's a lot of processes and forms that are all paper-based that a lot of people don't know actually where they actually go. They just do it because that's what we used to do 20-odd years ago. And working with some of the providers in terms of cloud services ensures that you have to standardise rather than customise. That therefore adds value to the economy, adds value to the customer, and therefore adds value to the bottom line as well. And there's no reason, exactly what you're saying, there's no reason why we can't do it. It's actually asking the question, how can we do it, and how can we get it done, and how can we ensure that we're adding value across all those various stakeholders, but still being pragmatic and cautious. And that's the value of actually partnering with organisations that bring that forward. And then on top of that, if we do it well, in terms of New South Wales, which we can and we are, then that adds value back to the suppliers, who then can obviously on-sell to some of the other organisations and states as well. So it's a common process there.
Okay, and our final question to the panel, and then we'll open it up, is what types of impact are you seeing on the ICT industry that is coming? Because obviously, as the earlier speaker said, it's not just within government, it's actually happening on the industry itself. And how is that being dealt with in response to changing government requirements? Richard, have you a thought there?
I think one of the biggest changes that was alluded to here actually is that we need to let go of the end user device. It's all over. It was actually all over a long time ago, but IT departments were in denial that they were still in control of everybody's home computer and their smartphone and everything else. We need to let go of it, and instead we need to concentrate on our data centres. We need to have a strong perimeter, we need to focus on security, we need to focus on integration and quality. And we need to allow people to bring their own device, which has now become very personal. Everyone needs to have whatever they need, and it's their own device. And we need to change ourselves to fit into that. I think that's one of the big changes. It's a lot of security focus over the next few years.
I think that this is a fundamental shift, and I think as we outsource a whole lot of the things that have been, the pipes, the boxes, we're going to change and transform the nature of the skills we need in the workforce. I think that's only, again, just at the beginning, but we're going to need more analysts, we're going to need more business-focused, responsive ICT. We're going to need more enablers. Those types of things, I think, are coming down the line. Locally, I think that it also opens up a whole lot of different changes, because if we're in the apps world, we're looking for perhaps smaller, perhaps far more componentised ways of putting things together. so they can be very flexible, so we can build in different ways. That, of course, puts a different requirement on the governance of that, because we can't, you can hear if we've got many apps joined together to provide infinite flexibility, and it's very agile and it's building all the time, then we can't forget the governance that we need to put around some of that to actually know what we've got and who's got it. So I think there are quite significant changes coming around, but it's all very positive and it's very exciting.
But it's also pretty scary, though, I think. So for industry, like intrinsically, cloud services is a scale business. So it doesn't make any sense to have a 5-person infrastructure as a service company with $100,000 of capitalisation. So there's at one end of the market, inherently it's driving to scale, and the big players will win, without question. In the area of applications, it's of course intriguingly going the other way in some ways because of the development of API economies, and the emergence of APIs as a powerful force for actual, like service-oriented architecture, really, web services that actually work and plug and play. There's an merger and acquisition game going on the software side of the industry, with the big players gobbling up all these small apps type players is one aspect of it. So, local players, of course, are trying to develop new innovative service offerings in order to be gobbled up and bank their millions. In this way, government just, in my view, has to put its demand on the table, and this is the most important thing from this New South Wales ICT strategy, and actually has distinguished New South Wales thinking from other jurisdictions for the last few years, is actually this visionary propensity to put your demand on the table and say, this is the direction we are going, and to give a strong signal to industry to come forward with solutions as a service character. Now, that's a good thing for the local ICT industry to the extent that they can bring those solutions forward and innovate locally, because cloud enables those solutions to be sold to a global audience as well. And all governments around the world are looking for these as-a-service type solutions. There's no real reason why they can't come out of Australia. Last thing we really want to see is this just turning into a massive offshoring of our entire ICT industry. So government, of course, has to be sensitive to the needs of getting scale and getting enterprise-grade solutions, but not at the same time just kind of giving all the business to big overseas corporations. So there's a complex dynamic in all of that. But at the end of the day, it's now possible in cloud services to have a software solution which you develop in Sydney and sell, or in any town in Australia, and sell to the entire world. So that's got to be a good thing. And government putting its demand on the table stimulates the local response, which creates that activity, I think.
Any last thoughts on your relationship with the ICT industry as a result of...
Well, the only comment, particularly to the suppliers here, is I think it's absolutely an imperative to ensure that you work with government as a whole rather than each individual agency, to ensure that we get benefit right across, because it's the right thing for the community, right thing for the government, and also allows you to actually have a broader relationship. So if you're doing work with, say, Service New South Wales in terms of providing services, I want to make sure that's actually being worked through with William and the team, so the whole of government can actually benefit from the learning, not just the silo of Service New South Wales, because that's the win that comes through, ensuring that we actually get that whole holistic benefit. And too many times I've seen where it's done on a silo basis, that sometimes maybe an agency, but it's also, as far as I'm concerned, it's also the supplier. So I want to see that whole of government perspective.
We've had a lot of S words here today. I think the last one is the system is no longer the IT system, but the system across government versus the silos. The suppliers, the services, things are scary, but they're also driving standardisation across agencies, security, solutions, speed of response as well as speed of solution, and skills are changing. So here's your chance. The demand is on the table, to quote Steve, both in terms of the updated ICT strategy, but also this new government policy with terms of cloud services policy and guidelines.
David Owen from BAE Systems. One of the interesting things to me about cloud is that in the old school model, government had a lot of control over requirements and exactly what was built. And in this new model, you're moving to a world where organisations are putting things on the table and you buy them based on whether they meet your requirements. I guess the interesting thing to me is the control issue, that in the future, a large corporation may choose to steer the functionality based on what other customers are asking for in other places or things. Does the panel have a view on how the government retains some degree of control over the future direction and pricing and all those things to make sure that you're not taken in a direction you don't want to go?
Look, my reaction to that is just that control has turned out to be a poison chalice more often than not, because it's imposed cost structures and inflexibilities on governments. So the loss of control is a benefit. Now, of course, to some degree, there will be bad outcomes from that. Plan B, always have a tested Plan B, so that you know what you would do if you become unhappy with the vendor. It's the last resort. The usual kind of influencing mechanisms over functional release schedules and things apply. Just talk to the vendors. And of course, always keep, prenuptial agreement over the data, so you do have access to the data and can get it back if you need to. These are basic things.
Richard.
The biggest problem is that government agencies have frequently been trying to specify what are actually generic products. And all it does is screw up things and cause tremendous cost. Email as an example, and generic products like that, why should we specify it? And yes, there is some compromise in some cases, but I think public cloud, for instance, is easy for generic products first. And there will be some things which are very unique to your agency that you will not put into a public cloud. You may put into your own private cloud. So you just need to make the right decision.
My answer to that is that we need to work out the functionality which is changing and should be able to change very agilely with different service models which are coming down the line. If the controls are moved to different points, you have different levels of control. So I think the controls need to move to the data level, not the functionality level of the system.
I think standardisation is better than customisation, and I think there's too many old B-grade movies where we've seen the old ending where people have customised and it ends up in the same story. So I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, and as Steve said, you just got to ensure you balance it.
You just touched on a point I was going to raise, and that is there a position in the government vis-a-vis private versus public cloud, and if so, what is it?
It's very simple. Government supports all forms of cloud fit for purpose. So you do your analysis. You do your analysis of cost, of risk, of functionality. It's very, very straightforward. You only use what is appropriate. So I guess bottom line is you go for the most cost-effective solution that is fit for purpose and is at an acceptable risk and performance.
It's also worth, I think, increasingly realising that that whole distinction is increasingly invalid. So pure public and pure private are two ends of a continuum, and in the middle is a vast range of different things, and it just depends what your needs are and what the way the service is provided. If you look at something like Amazon Web Services, which most people would regard as a public cloud service offering, then you can access physically dedicated machines in Amazon Web Services over entirely secure communication links. Now, that's just the same as a public, or even the same as kind of in-house IT. It's just a different way of doing it. So the way I look at it in terms of strategic thinking is you're far better off to take your thinking to the pure public cloud and say, how could I meet my business requirements using a pure public cloud services solution, and try and resolve all of the issues around data sovereignty, security, privacy and everything. And that may mean you have to come back for some applications, for some data, for some workloads. But if you can get your thinking to buying and using public cloud services, then you're getting the maximum benefit of this huge transformation that's occurring in the IT industry. And there may be some cases where that's not appropriate, but at least you've got your thinking to the point where you can deal with those issues.
I think it's also I'm a little with Steve. Cloud isn't cloud. I mean, or what is cloud? Lumping everything together into one word is actually fundamentally misleading, and I think we need to segregate it out. And there are many different services. There are many different flavours of cloud. If we're talking about data storage, it's one thing. If we're talking about functionality, it's another. Are we talking about infrastructure? Is it all bundled together? Does it need to be all bundled together? Can't we pull them out further? So I think we need a lot more sophistication when we're talking about cloud. You know, what are we talking about here?
David Eyre from New South Wales Farmers. We work in agriculture. We're just scratching a surface of how a digital economy can transform agriculture as an industry. But the key really is interoperability and decision support, if you like, where you're joining up different data sets, public and government. And the DNA of that is the data model. And my question is around the IP around that and the commercial driver, if you like, for people who are investing in solving these really intellectually challenging data modelling tasks. Who owns the IP? And if it's going to all go into the public cloud, how are entities going to be motivated to spend the money to get it right? I see it as like the debate around the ownership of the human genome.
I think it's a really great question, and obviously I'd be entirely in agreement with you. It does all come down to the data model, which I think is a real struggle for all organisations, and government in this is no different from any other organisations. Hard to actually go back to the fundamentals, rethink the fundamentals, because we actually want to do really quick, service delivery stuff. Who owns the IP? Look, I don't know what the answer to that is, but given where government is going, I suspect the answer will be it's going to be open and shared. But I am not in a position to make that commitment from the government.
There is a lot of work currently being undertaken by DFS and by the ICT Leadership Group in moving forward to get data sets, both spatial and of every kind, into a format that all citizens can use to leverage for their own apps or use for whatever purposes they wish. And all the issues around licensing are being covered, as well as the data quality. So there's a new way of thinking that if the data is of medium quality, it's still usable, but it's labelled as such. So you're going to see a lot of action in that area.
It's Matt Wynne-Jones from Lexmark and also part of the AIIA. My question is really, we've seen some good success stories in early adopters in the use of the government data centre and also cloud services. As a citizen, I'd like to provide a bigger stick to get some of the slower moving agencies to get some advantage out of that. What sticks exist within the government to accelerate that transition? My understanding is that all agencies are generally required to move to the government data centre, unless they've got a good reason not to, and that's over the next few years. All the agencies that I'm working with all have plans to move. Most of them are moving next year.
It's more efficient, better security, it's going to add value, and also you just got to ensure you're delivering on your cost imperatives.
Chris Feckner from the Office of Environment and Heritage. You've talked a lot today about standardisation around cloud services. If you go back historically, a lot of the argument for in-house development, in-house hosting was differentiation. Are you seeing a move away from differentiation in government now?
There's many processes across different agencies, including licences throughout, that everyone thought that they've got to be different. And there's so many different licences and cards and processes and forms and proof of identity and systems to support it, that it's next to impossible to provide a quality customer service. It's next to impossible for some of the front-end service providers, being staff, customer service representatives, to provide that great customer service. And if I look at, and given we heard from John earlier on banking side, there used to be a great argument to have all these differentiated banking products as well, that there was this huge tail of products where we had 10 or 20 people using those products. So my view is that our first role is look where is there standardisation to ensure that we provide a quality customer service, and if there is differentiation, firstly understand how can we standardise it to ensure that we add value back to the broader community and the economy. And it's taken us probably 100 odd years to get to this point in differentiation. It's certainly going to take us a bit of time to standardise it, and the value will certainly start to come through on that basis. And I don't see many good reasons for some of the reasons to be for some of the things to be differentiated. And in my 10 months now, it's gone fast, been here since November, I've heard some very good, reasonable reasons about why we're different, and a lot of them don't stack up at all. And I think it's up to us to actually bring it together.
Okay.
On a larger scale, I think one of the interesting things that comes out is the boundaries of this is mine, this is yours. So interoperability is the key, or one of the key drivers. Where does that start and end is a really interesting question. Are the boundaries actually as solid as you think they are? Are they being more permeable these days? Are we actually just talking about a bigger organisation, the New South Wales Government? I think these are questions that are beginning to be asked as we deliver services in different ways.
I was just going to say the pointy end of agencies is different. That's why they're different agencies, and all the rest is the same.
Okay, so Steve.
And I just as a final comment, I think the differentiation argument is a good one, and it kind of goes around government policy in cycles every 10 years or so. But when you look at cloud services, just to kind of snap into reality, the big cloud services platforms are being used by a very large number of businesses to do a very diverse range of things. And often direct competitors in the commercial sector are using the same cloud services, software as a service or infrastructure as a service platforms to compete head on. So I think we're just getting to a more practical kind of understanding of what the commodity layer of the ICT world looks like now. And you know, it's that old adage about it's not how big it is, it's what you do with it kind of thing, is just that, you know, it's how you use these platforms to differentiate that's the important thing, not building, you know, unnecessary customisations in the platforms themselves.
Which is a lovely way for this panel to finish. So thank you very much, everyone, and I'll hand back to Warren.
Thank you very much, Jane, and Glenn, Steve, Barbara and Richard, thank you very much for that. Certainly I see one of the responsibilities of DFS will be to actually not use a big stick, which is what central agencies generally have done without much success, but actually work with agencies to persuade them and to move them by helping them to, I guess, a different world where they've transformed their business. The Premier, when he came to office, was very clear about how he expected customers, citizens of New South Wales to be able to deal with government. We're not there yet. Glenn's certainly part of the first tranche of that, but the direction's clear. We just need now to get everyone aligned, and we'll be working very hard on it. But what I'd love to do is bottle the wisdom and experience of the panel and take that with me as I go around talking to agencies. So join me again in thanking the panel for their time and effort. Thank you. And as we said at the start, government doesn't have all the answers. We really appreciate the support and contribution we've had from each of you, both today and previously, but also into the future, and we look forward to continuing dialogue. Thank you very much for coming.